Welcome to Dundalk TV and our first edition of Scott Collier and the Black Conservatives. I have been waiting to do this show for some time, and I'm very happy to have my friend Tamu Davenport and Donald Rubottom. They're both Baltimore City residents, and I would like for them to share a little bit of information about themselves. And ladies first, Tamu.
Well, thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me on your show. I am Tamu Davenport. I live in Baltimore City. I live in the Penn North District. Most of you would probably say you're not familiar with Penn North, except I would wager that each of you has probably been in my community at some point in time. In the year 2015, when there were riots in Baltimore City, the riots were happening at the CVS in the corner of North Avenue and Pennsylvania Avenues. My backyard faces the CVS that was looted and burned. I consider myself to be not so much a political activist as much as I am a mother and a grandmother. I got involved in the political spectrum because I want a future for my grandchildren. I have lived in Baltimore City. I'm a homeowner. I've lived in Baltimore City for over 30 years. I have, my daughter was born in the home where we live. She's a graduate of Morgan State University. I'm a graduate of Goucher College. I worked for 33 years with the state of Maryland. I just retired in October. And per the tagline under my name, I currently sit on Baltimore City Republican Central Committee in Baltimore City.
And she's also a great friend and
Yes,
someone that is very religious and shares a lot of things online. And you're very concerned about the abortions
Absolutely.
that are happening as well in your community.
Absolutely.
And as a Christian, throughout the United States as well.
Absolutely.
So, yes.
Scott is absolutely correct. I've been involved with the Right for Life movement here in Baltimore City. I'm a member of Defend Life once a week, and I invite anyone to come down once a week. I stand in front of Planned Parenthood. We are part of a prayer activist team. We simply pray. If we can connect, we do try to connect with the young ladies as they're going in. I am there once a week, but there is someone literally in front of Planned Parenthood on Howard Street in Baltimore City every day of the week. The exception is Tuesday. On Tuesday, they do not kill babies, and on Sunday, they are closed. But yes, very much involved. I'm also very much involved with the other spectrum. As we are now looking in Maryland, we're looking at euthanasia. We're looking at the patient-assisted suicide law. And I have great concern about life on either end, life when it's beginning and life as it is ending. And as a Christian, I certainly believe that only God has the authority to end a life.
And because we touched on that very important issue there, is there any kind of contact information that somebody wants to support your organization, become involved with your organization, that they can reach out to you and participate in whatever way they would like to? So
Absolutely.
please share that.
Defendlife.org. If you go on defendlife.org, all of the organizations that is kind of the umbrella organization. Right to Life, we just opened a chapter in Baltimore City.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. I really am so happy that you're doing that. When I saw that, I shared it off your Facebook site.
Thank you, Scott.
Now we're going to move on to my friend Donald Rubottom. And Donald, I don't know if you have an S underneath of there, but you definitely should, because you are a Superman in the community. You do so many things for the community itself, but also you have a great interest in what is happening with the children in your neighborhood. And I saw a video, it seems like maybe 3-4 years ago, where you were walking through the neighborhood and you were showing some of the problems that were going on. I said, man, I have to talk to this guy. So reached out to Donald, and we've been friends ever since. He has actually spoken at one of my community meetings that was at Merritt Park Baptist Church years ago. And you couldn't find a better guy. And I know you're making a difference in your community, both of you. And I would like for you to share the information you would like to share, and also your work history is very amazing as well. So please share that as well.
First of all, I'd like to also thank you for inviting me to come on and be a guest. I'd like to just start off with saying that I'm a Baltimorean. I was born and raised in Baltimore City at Lutheran Hospital. I came up on the rolls of welfare, a single parent pretty much. My mother had to raise 3 kids by herself in the early 60s and 70s, right? And during that time, I've had some traumatic experiences in growing up. I grew up during the lead paint era, which everybody is pretty much familiar with. I can remember the lead that sat in the windowsills from the paint over and over again, you know, over the years. But I can remember that lead paint sitting in the windowsills growing up in the city of Baltimore. Fortunately, I did not become one of those children who were exposed to it, but I can remember it being there. Coming up on the rolls of welfare, you know, there were times when my mother could afford to pay the rent, and then there were times that she couldn't. I had an experience at a school that I'll never forget. I went to Barclay Elementary School. It was one of my first memories as a child, but I remember sitting in the classroom, going to school that particular day, and I was no more than about 5 or 6 years old. But I knew that day when I left out to go to school, I knew that the possibility was high that I wasn't going to come back to the same home. And the reason I wasn't going to come back to the same home was because my mother and all our furniture and stuff was going to be put out because she couldn't afford to pay the rent. I remember being in that classroom at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the bell just rang, and I'm still sitting there and the teacher's wondering why I'm not leaving school. And the reason that I didn't want to leave school is because I didn't want to go home and bend that corner and not see a home there.
The sky was falling.
Exactly. So that was my upbringing as a child in Baltimore City. However, there were some things that were instilled in me by my mother. She did the best she could with what she had to work with.
Yes.
But there was a couple of things that she instilled in us. She instilled in us to always have pride. Always have pride. And you don't ask anybody for anything. Those were 2 pet peeves that my mother had that she instilled in us. The home that I live in now, I've lived there for about 27 years because I can't stand moving, right? So I guess that's why I'm still there. But as time went on, you know, I grew up and I didn't have a real father figure in my life. And because I didn't have a father figure in my life, I had to learn to be one had to learn to be a father as I you know, grew. And I ended up having my own set of kids, and of course I wanted to give them everything that I didn't have, you know. One of the things that I forgot to learn to do with going through that was learning how to be a lover as opposed to being a provider. I was more of a provider type father than I was a lover. But as time went on, you know, even those things got better and they improved. My occupational specialty, first of all, I'll start off with, I served in the military just a little less than 10 years. I served honorably. I was discharged. I went from the military to the Maryland Department of Corrections, which I worked for 20 years, and I retired. I currently work in a law enforcement agency here in Baltimore City. Right, and one of the things that
you're not representing them tonight. You're not.
That's correct. I'm not. I'm here as a community activist / free thinker. But one of the things that I consider myself when I do work in the community, I am a gatekeeper, not an overseer. I always try to come off from a gatekeeper perspective as opposed to an overseer perspective. Now, what do I mean by that? I don't cruise the communities as if I am the enemy. You know, one of the biggest failures in Baltimore City when it comes to law enforcement in the community is you have a lot of law enforcement who don't know the behavior of the communities that they work in. That's the biggest problem with law enforcement in our communities. If you never lived in a row home in Baltimore City, then you know nothing about the behavior of Baltimore City. I say that to say this. At 1 o'clock in the morning in the middle of July, a hot July summer night, Grandma's in the house and she's got to bring little Day out on the steps at 1 o'clock in the morning because that house is unbearable to sleep in. Well, the reason that grandma has to do that is because guess what? Day has asthma, and grandma already knows if I don't let Day come out here at 1 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to find myself in the emergency room because Day done had an asthma attack, right? Well, when you ask the average officer where do they live, right? They may tell you they live in Howard County, for example, right? And you'll ask them, say, well, where are your kids at right now? Oh, they're in bed asleep where they're supposed to be. Do you have centralized air conditioning where you live? Yes. Well, that's your answer. See, where Day is on them steps at 1 o'clock in the morning, those steps, that's a Baltimore City version of a Howard County air conditioning unit. In other words, what I'm saying is the same exact way you live in Howard County is the same exact way people live in Baltimore City. Sometimes we just miss the difference in the amenities. And this is one of the biggest miscommunications that we have with law enforcement and the black community and other poor communities like the black community. This is why we have these type of problems. So one of the things that I would like to do, or that I try to do, is I try to bridge that gap by being in those communities, right? Not just when I'm working, but also when I'm off work, to communicate with the young people in the community. Don't go to the elementary school and talk to the kids. Don't just go to the community meeting and talk to the kids. Go out there on those corners where those kids are at and establish a relationship with them. You know, because two things are going on when I'm on that corner with those kids. The first thing that's going on, there's no laws being broken. The second thing that's going on, we're developing a rapport with each other. And this is some of the things that we need to do to bridge the gap when it comes to community and police relations.
Yes, I 100% agree. And you were kind enough to take me into your neighborhood and show me what is actually happening there. It's heartbreaking to me to see the way kids are being raised there. They're born into a certain area. Our government is totally failing them. And it is, I consider what is happening there a crime against humanity. We have so much tax dollars going into political figures' hands, but it is not making it to the streets where it needs to. And I just, your message is very powerful, and I would like to get a little bit of insight into what you think might be the remedy to some of the problems that you see as well, Timo.
I think that Donald and I talked a little bit about this before we went on the air, but I think that one of the things that we agree is that family structure is definitely lacking in the community. We certainly see that there is a need for a two-parent household, father and a mother. That's the order. I think that when that is out of order, then we have the other things that we're seeing in my community in particular, the open air drug markets that are just incredible. The lack of the word that I'm not sure what the word is, but the lack of effective policing. The Baltimore City Police have been rendered this is my opinion and this is my impression, they have been rendered pretty much invalid and been made invalids in our city. They have no real authority with our young people, and the young people know this. So it is an anarchistic society. I also believe quite earnestly, I've watched this, like I mentioned earlier, 2015 is the earmark for me. We had the riots in Baltimore City. I've literally seen a spiraling downward of my community since 2015. We did not discuss this before we went on the air, but I think it's calculated. I think God's word, the Bible says the devil has three tricks, and only three tricks, and he uses them over and over again. I watched as when the city gentrifies a community, among the things that they do is they pour drugs into that community, make it unbearable for the people who live in the community, they make it unbearable for people who pass through the community. So the next objective is to move those people out, and then all of a sudden you see $350,000 homes. And I happen to live in a really incredible part of the city. To my left is Druid Hill Park, and of course, if you've passed by the park, you know that the reservoir is being renovated. They've already earmarked Pennsylvania Avenue for revitalization. If you go a little bit to the west on a little bit east on North Avenue, you have what's being deemed now the new cultural center. Johns Hopkins has also started acquiring property around Howard and North Avenue. So it's obvious to me that there's a plan for my community. It just doesn't include the people who are currently living in the community.
I just like to add, and I don't. It's so much that we can talk about right now, and there's so many things that are wrong. But let me just hit home with this. One of the biggest problems that we have in many of these communities is we make excuses for our young generation, as opposed to teaching them that life is also about consequences. Consequences now in our community is an endangered species. You know, there's no sense of responsibility on anybody's part, you know, when you look at a lot of the things that are going on in this city. Most citizens would agree in Baltimore that the victim is no longer treated like a victim.
Absolutely.
The criminal in this city is treated like the victim. The criminal is victimized. I'll give you an example. The young man who unfortunately ran over and killed Baltimore County Police Officer Amy Caprio,
yes.
Right? The most unfortunate thing about that situation was he had a mother who was reaching out and begging the system to take a hold of her son because she saw the writing on the wall. He was going to either kid himself killed or kill somebody. And what ends up happening? Within a 6-month period, when they checked that young man's record, they checked his record and he had 4 to 5 other stolen cars in a 6-month period. I want you to just think for a minute. If maybe he would have went to jail for a minute the first time. Maybe if he would have went to jail for a minute, maybe the second time, the third time, or the fourth time, maybe he would have saw the writing on the wall and said, hey, look, this fire is hot. I don't want to touch it no more. And she would still be here raising her family, a happy person taking care of her kids. That young man would be on the straight and narrow somewhere doing something that is positive in his life. But you know what he's doing right now? He's serving a life sentence in prison. A life sentence. Because nobody saved him from himself. And we have a bunch of young people in this city who have not been saved from themselves. You know, there are consequences to everything we do. And if children, young people, if they don't see there's a consequence in their behavior, guess what?
Right.
It's going to continue the way it is. And it comes a point in time where you have this situation with the squeegee kids, for example, and the young squeegee adults, for example. I'm all for helping someone get employment, but there's a difference with trying to find a job and committing a crime. And when you commit a crime, you should know that there's going to be consequences behind it. You know, we got to stop making excuses. There's no white man problem in America. There's no black man problem in America. There's a human problem in America. And we are all responsible for all of our communities as a whole. And we have to take a hold of our communities. Now, if you want to talk about racism, there's a lot of intellectual racism going on, but the days of the Ku Klux Klan standing outside your door in sheets and things like that, that's non-existent. But these are the type of things that are thrown out there at us as a people, right? To sidebar, to get us to think some other kind of way. You know, to deflect us from what the real reality is. Another example of that was these Confederate statues. When they all of a sudden, everybody was in an uproar and they went mob rule and wanted the Confederate statues torn down. But what they didn't realize was, guess what? When you tear down those Confederate statues, Confederacy is synonymous with slavery. They go hand in hand with each other. It's American history. America is a beautiful place and it's an ugly place. It has a beautiful history and it has an ugly history. But at the end of the day, this is all of our home and we should all respect it. What they should have did with those Confederate statues, and this is my opinion, the same way you can go to Pearl Harbor and you can see the USS Missouri and a host of other ships and things that were damaged during the bombing of Pearl Harbor. You can walk through Pearl Harbor, and you know what? No one has to say a word to you. And the captions on those ships will tell you the history. And that's the same thing that they should have did with these Confederate statues instead of pulling them down, because they are American history. If Robert E. Lee had 400 slaves died under his watch, then that's what the caption of that statue should have said. But we have to get away from this race baiting. We got a lot of race baiting going on. We got a lot of gender issues going on. We got a lot of border issues going on. We got a lot of nationalism going on when it comes to the American flag and the disrespect of it. I served in the U.S. military, you know, and I went over there to give everybody the right to be able to say what they want to say and do what they want to do in this country. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to get carried away.
That's okay. It's a very powerful message, but that's where we're going to have to finish this time. There's so much more that needs to be said. I would like to say that these two lovely people are not only great community activists and people just doing everything they can for their community, they are wonderful patriots as well, who love our flag and America. And I think that they should be held as an example of the way everybody should look at things. Donald and I disagree. Tamu and I disagree. But we're all friends at the end of the day. And on the way here, I was having a conversation with Donald, and I said, Donald, I don't wish to argue with you. We were talking a little bit about race. That's not my strong point exactly, especially speaking from a black perspective. So I gave Donald the respect of saying, Donald, I'm just going to listen to what you have to say, and here we are sitting here having a conversation with all of our Dundalk TV viewers. So thank you both very much for being here tonight, and I hope that you both come back in the near future.
Thank you for having me,
Thanks
Scott.
for having me. And can I
it.
just say one more thing to you,
Certainly.
Scott, real quick,
Certainly.
right? You know, sometimes we can have a conversation and we can agree and we can disagree, and it's unfortunate when people take this notion that just because you happen to be white and I happen to be black and we don't agree with each other, it has to be racial. It's not racial.
Well,
it's
would you agree with me that I had no choice in the color of my skin and you had none in yours either?
Your opinion is based on your life experience and mine is based on mine, and
Yes,
it has
but
absolutely nothing to do with race.
None of us had the choice to say, hey, I want to be black, I want to be white, I want to be red.
That's exactly correct.
Whatever. So to judge somebody or look at them by the color of their skin and judge by that alone, that's a very small person in my eyes.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly correct.
Well,
I just wanted to touch on that with you real quick.
Well, I appreciate that very much. Thank you both for being here again. So please subscribe and share this video.